Okay, finishing off the bones of the face and the jaw, we have our mandible. So this bone, otherwise known as our jawbone, is called the mandible. A couple pieces that we should know about. Let's take a lateral view. So this is our head, or the condylar process. So this is what ultimately is going to meet up with the mandibular fossa of the temporal bone. So this essentially becomes our jawbone, if you will, or at least a piece of the mandible that forms our jawbone and articulates with the temporal bone. We then, this little U-shape area here, we call the mandibular notch. The head of the mandible then turns into the neck of the mandible right through here. This particular area we refer to as the ramus. So we've got a head, we've got a neck, now we've got some arms, and then finally we're going to build the body. So this would then become the body of the mandible. This pointy part that becomes, you can palpate it on yourself, it's kind of the bottom area of your jaw. This creates your jawline, if you will. We refer to this as your angle. If we go now anteriorly, from an anterior view, we have the mental protuberance. Fancy name for your chin. So if you think about the thinker position and where is he grabbing, well, he's grabbing his chin. So that makes sense that we call this the mental protuberance. What you can maybe be able to appreciate a little bit as I zoom in, these little holes here, we call those the mental foramen. Why? Because they're in that mental portion or chin portion, and they're an opening or a hole. So we'll call that a foramen. We also have alveolar processes, basically areas that are going to house the teeth. So this forms your bottom row of teeth with those processes. Now, if we look inside the jaw, there's a couple other pieces that we would like to identify. Oh, and you know what? I forgot a key piece right here. This U shape we identified as the mandibular notch. This piece right here we would refer to as the coronoid process. Now, this is an area we've heard coronoid at the elbow as well. Not to be confused with the coracoid process in the shoulder and off of the scapula. This is the coronoid process of the mandible. So now we can go back inside the jaw. So here we have our anterior view, and now I'm just going to give us a posterior view here. We've got this little, let me see if we can see it better if I zoom in. This little pointy piece of the mandible right here, we call that the lingula. And just behind it, we have again a little opening or hole that we'll call the mandibular foramen. Alright. We also have off of the chin, if you will, but on the interior side we have a spiny protrusion. We call those that's the mental spines. We also can see a little bit of a line forming just around these back molars here. Let's see if I can point to that. This line right here, we'll refer to that as the mylohyoid line. Right here, mylohyoid line. And we'll talk more about those muscles further along in the course. But that's an area of attachment for those particular areas. Now, if I dive just posterior to that, that's where we should find our mylohyoid sulcus, or our mylohyoid groove. This line kind of projects here, and just underneath this area we'll call our submandibular fossa. And then if we look and we go just a little bit further anterior here, let me get this all oriented here. This is where, I can't remember if I showed you this already, that screw is basically marking the area of the mental spines. So there we have the jaw, and that really concludes the skull, completing the neurocranium and the viscerocranium, or the bones of the face and the jaw.